Hello and welcome to Buying into the Future, where we discuss all things public procurement. And today we're going to be discussing Building Information Modeling, or BIM, a methodology used in construction. And we're very happy that we have two guests with us today who know far more about this subject than me. And I'd like to ask them to introduce themselves now. And we'll go ladies first, if you don't mind. Samira, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Samira Bousseta. I'm a senior expert on innovation procurement at Altair, a consulting company. I am the community manager of the BIM Community of Practice on the Public Buyers Community platform.
And Javier, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you, Steve, for having me here. I'm Javier Lozano, Deputy BIM Director for BIM and Digital Continuity in ADIF. ADIF is the Spanish Railway Infrastructure Manager, and we've been implementing BIM since 2016, and we can say that we have fully deployed the BIM implementation for projects and construction. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to both of you. So, Javier, if I could start with you and ask for just a little bit of a general background to what exactly is BIM, where is it used, what does it do?
Yeah, you say it perfectly. BIM is a methodology. Therefore, BIM are processes in order to achieve some goals, like, for example, develop a construction project, do the construction of the project, also to use the digital models that are a key part of the BIM methodology in the maintenance part and in the asset management phase. So therefore, it's very, very important to say that BIM is not a technology, but the technology is a key part of the methodology. There is no BIM without technology, without software. And of course, there is something very important about BIM is that these processes are made by people, not machines, no software, people who have the correct training and the perfect balance between these engineering skills and capacity that traditional engineers might have or architects and these technology capacities that comes along with the digital world. So it's kind of a balance between traditional methodology, new digital methodologies that are combined into a quite wide set of new processes that people in a collaborative way start to do.
Thank you for giving us such a great general overview. Why should member states be using BIM more? I'm interested in what advantages it has maybe over the more traditional form, the traditional methodologies, to use your word.
Yeah, the advantages or the benefits of BIM are quite a few. For example, investment efficiency, I would say, not in the short term, but in the mid or long term, for sure. If we do a correct BIM implementation at a national level, organization, public level, public and investment efficiency should be a key point of the advantage of applying BIM. Also, concepts regarding safety, regarding collaboration, regarding sustainability, quality in the works we do, in the projects we deliver, and so on. So even with just one of them, it would be great to implement BIM. But as you can see, there are quite a few. The point is that not because you implement BIM, you are going to get these advantages per se. You have to look to them. You have to set the correct requirements. You have to work that goals in order to get the best of these advantages that are theoretical, but are reachable with good implementations, with good national plan.
You mentioned that technology is a big part of this. And I'm wondering, because whenever there's technology around, there are different programs, different providers, issues with things like compatibility, etc. Are there issues with this? If so, what advice would you give? How could these issues be dealt with?
Yeah, that's a very, very important point. Every organization, even at the national level, it must be understood that there is no BIM without technology and without the software that the software vendors provide. Therefore, it's a very important analysis you have to make whether you go to an open BIM world, that's, for example, our ADIF's view, trying to go to an open BIM in order to have scalability, interoperability between the systems, to not be a slave by any kind of software provider that might get us in trouble is kind of a balance. So there is no general rules or there is no general recommendation, rather than having a good analysis about this. What do I need? What do I need? And why do I need this? What for? And then that kind of analysis will lead you to have the best technological approach to any kind of BIM implementation.
Thank you very much for that. And now, if I could, I'd like to turn to you, Samira. And again, I think Javier mentioned this in his introduction, but I'd like your thoughts on it. So at the kind of political, institutional level, in terms of buying or getting hold of this, some of the equipment, implementing the methodology, what needs to happen for BIM to be used more widely at those levels?
Just to answer your question, Steve, I will use the findings that we have developed through a survey we have launched last year. And with this survey, we identify what are the main challenges, especially for public buyers to use BIM, and the different gaps. And the main challenges identified are, first, the lack of support for integrating BIM into procurement. Second challenge, also the lack of BIM expertise and skills. And last challenge, which is linked also to Javier's comments, a complex and not standardized framework, which means that these findings really underline the need to develop a more structured support and standardized frameworks to support public buyers to use BIM, but also to develop a wider, let's say, collaboration, and especially at EU level. So following those findings, we have, through this survey, identified some expectations of what should, let's say, institutions at national or EU level do. And one of the first expectations from, let's say, the practitioners is first to develop those national plans, or at least some policy framework to support the use of BIM by public buyers, and in parallel develop some training or learning platform where they can get the expertise needed. And lastly, develop a unified European approach to BIM in public procurement. So to answer your question, so to make really BIM, let's say, happening or more used by public buyers, it's not only at national level that there is a need for developing more let's say, SaaS framework, but also to create this cross collaboration between the different institutions at EU level to accelerate the use of BIM. And this is what, let's say, the aim of this community of practice we are also developing.
Thank you very much. And in some way, I think you've already touched on what was going to be my next question, which was about regulations and standards. Now, from what you said, Samira, I get the impression that there are no clear guidelines and regulations regarding its implementation. Did I understand that correctly?
In some member states, like in Spain, and maybe Javier can also say a word about it, but also in Ireland and in Poland or in Finland, there are some national plans to support the use of BIM, and also to develop some actions in order to have the public buyers use BIM. It's not developed at EU level, and it's not like developed in every member state, and the level of maturity in developing those plans are a bit, let's say, different from a member state to another one, which means that if we want to improve the use of BIM, there is a need to exchange between the different member states so they can align on what has to be done to be more effective in achieving this objective. Maybe Javier can tell more about what is the national plan in Spain. But as you said, Steve, it's still really open, and the objective also of the community of practice is to map the different policies which are developed at EU level, and to identify what, let's say, are the most efficient, or at least what are the ones who are who have impact on the ground and see how other member states could maybe use this in order to start developing their own national plans.
Thank you. Javier, since you were asked, would you be in a position to answer that question?
Yeah, for me, for example, having a national plan is the way to go in order to push forward and foster BIM implementation, at least by the public sector. It doesn't get any better than that. Maybe having a EU policy, let's say, mandate, even that's a bigger umbrella under all this. But the national plan is the definitive tool for public organization to really see BIM as something absolutely mandatory, and there is no questionable things about it. So you have to, with our national plan, to comply with these progressive BIM implementation schedules that are set in different years. Very important thing about having a plan, it's also complementing it with a standard. Standardization is a key part of BIM because there are so many key players in this that without the standardization, it would be very hard to get the best of BIM. Therefore, there are some standards that are ISO standards, 10 standards like ISO 19650 that we have used, for example, for our own BIM implementation. And there are lots of working groups in ISO, in CEN, in Building Smart that are responsible for the open BIM documents and formats. And they are doing an amazing job trying to standardize, trying to push forward everything regarding BIM, and the national plan should take into account all these key players in the space. Therefore, although it's hard, these kind of recommendations or standards are like the foundations of implementing BIM. That's a key part, but also a key part to implement BIM at an organizational level are, of course, having the correct teams trained, with the capacity, with the absolute mandate from the top managerial part of the organization also pushing forward to it. So there are many, many key parts of BIM that should take into account to ultimately deliver and get the best of this, that, as I said before, it's worth it. And we can see it. At least in ADIF, we have right now thousands of people working with BIM requirements in more than 300 contracts. One sentence that I like very much is when our colleagues say that I don't want back to the conventional way of work.
Samira, you mentioned at the beginning the community of practice for organizations. I'd like to, if you could tell me a little bit more about that. What kind of, for example, organizations do you have who've joined your community of practice?
I would say, when we have a look to the list members, it's interesting to say that we have different type of stakeholders which are represented. We have first stakeholders from the public sector, and in this category, we have municipalities, ministries, let's say more public buyers represented. But we have also the policymakers, the ministries in charge of infrastructure or transport, which are leading this topic of BIM at a policy level. On the other side, more from the private side, we have a lot of SMEs, and they are, let's say, a key component of the value chain when it comes to BIM. It's also something which was highlighted by the survey we have launched last year, is that when we are talking about BIM, we should also integrate in the discussion the SMEs, which are developing also softwares for this, and they want to take part to the discussion. Another type of stakeholders which I found super interesting, at least for me, it's academics. So also bringing this type of stakeholders in the discussion to have also a more theoretical, let's say, view on how to better integrate BIM in public procurement also can help the buyers on one side and also the policymakers to better understand what should be done on this topic. So it's kind of broad. When we look at the members which are participating to the community of practice, which shows also that this topic is kind of complex. It's not just like having your suppliers and the buyers on each side, but in the discussion, policymakers and academics are key too.
And if you are going to do like a sales pitch for the community of practice to people who may be thinking about joining, haven't heard about the community of practice, why would you recommend that they join? What kind of benefits do they get from being part of this community?
The community of practice was developed first to bring this topic to the audience, just to make it visible as a topic. And the first, recommendation I would give to any organization which would like to join is you will get information about best practices, access to very interesting national plans, how they were developed, for example, in Spain, but also to very interesting resources that are shared by members, which can be different type of resources, guidances, sometimes also some example of requirements. So it's a way first to get the knowledge which is needed for this topic. The second, reason to join the community of practice is that we are trying to develop a dialogue between the different stakeholders. And to do that, we have a roadmap with different actions to get the engagement of the members and also all, type of stakeholders who would like to join the community of practice. And it's a way to not only get, access to resources, but also to bring to the community the different questions you have to identify maybe some members who have the same problems than you, and to get the best of participating in community of practice. We organize webinars where we showcase best practices. We develop some reports on different surveys that we are conducting. And we will, hopefully at the end of this year, develop a policy brief in order to support any member states who would like to develop a national plan. So it's not just about, having access to resources, but it's also being engaged in a very dynamic community of practice to co-develop together the different tools and also answers that are needed in order to support the use of BIM.
Just a quick supplementary question on that before I go back to Javier. If someone wants to join the community, how do they do that? Where do they find you?
So the community is hosted on the Public Buyers Community platform. So you just type on Google Public Buyers Community platform. The platform is hosted by the European Commission. So it's an EU framework where we are working in. And you have just to click on communities and you will find the BIM and Public Procurement community. You click on it and you will be a member. So it's pretty easy to join. You just have to create a profile on the platform. And as soon as you join the community of practice, you will have access to all the resources I've mentioned, and you will be also able to participate to the different actions that we are carrying out.
Javier, if I could jump back to you as we start to bring this to a close. Let's say I'm an organization and I've heard about BIM and I think it's a great methodology. I want to incorporate it in the work I do. Where do I start?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. The first thing, of course, is to ask absolutely to the managerial department or the steering committee of your organization the support you will need, because you will need it to deliver and to implement BIM, because you will need a team. Of course, if you are let's say a small company or small organization, the team could even be just one person. That's what we call sometimes the BIM champion of the organization. But as long as you have some medium or even big size, you will need a team. A trained, as I said before, with a high capacity team, with the support of the steering committee of the organization, because you will need to face great challenges in order to implement BIM. You also will need to invest. At the beginning, in any BIM implementation, there is the investment part of it, the investment phase, because you may need to invest in training, you may need to invest in software, you may need to invest maybe in some new colleagues you may need to hire as BIM managers, BIM coordinators, BIM experts, and that's very, very important. To make it even strategic, I guess lots of organizations have strategic plans. The next, of course, should be to do a very, very good analysis of your organization, of your needs, of what can you get from BIM, what are you going to use it for. And then is when the different strategic goals or specific goals and the different uses of the BIM methodology come along. I keep going about the BIM uses and all the value that bring us to our sector. So there is a big part of an analysis that every organization have to make. And I think the community of practices fits importance, for example, is to let the organization that might not have this knowledge to see the challenge ahead. So they can plan. So they can start collaborating with other parts of their organization to think what's the best method for them to implement.
Thank you. Final question as we come to the end now, and it's kind of looking into the future. It's a hypothetical. How do we see BIM evolving? And included in that, are there things we would like to see it do as a methodology to be incorporated that as yet are not possible?
I think in the future, we might stop talking about BIM and talking more about digital engineering, and even without the word digital, about the engineering itself. Of course, it will be digital. It's right now. And about the future of BIM, I also see absolutely the need to work towards our digital twins. We have a built environment. There will be digital twins of the assets of the built environment, and all our processes regarding designing, construction, maintenance will be done in technological platforms, working with digital twins. And at one point, we might start to think about models and information in another way. And even stopping talking about BIM, that it's been very important right now, and it will be for some years. But here, what we are talking about is about engineering and digital twins, maybe.
Samira, your thoughts about the future?
The change is already happening, and I agree with Javier that with this necessity to develop digital twins and to build in a more sustainable way, I would say that in the future, BIM will be totally integrated as a way to build, let's say. And one of the main challenge is really like in 10 years to make it mainstream. And I see it really happening because innovation and sustainability are now not only words, there are actions, there are policies developed by public organizations and public buyers. But we need to, let's say, take the steps, which is the hardest part, to achieve this. I mean, for me, I would say the future of BIM is already on its way.
With that, I'm afraid we have to close for today. Thank you both so very, very much for giving us your time and your expertise as we explore this very interesting topic. If you're listening in today, thank you very much for doing so. Please do keep checking back. We are adding new content as fast as we can, and we look forward to you joining us again in another podcast. But for now, we shall sign off and say thank you very much and goodbye.